Hello, this video is brought to you by Cade, Joey, and Jacob. In this video, we will be covering the three Southern generals, the Northern generals Ulysses S. Grant and William Tecumseh Sherman, and the battles of Shiloh and Chickamauga. We'll start off with the Southern generals. The Southern generals during the Civil War were Robert E. Lee, Andrew Stonewall Jackson, and James Longstreet. We'll start off with Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee was born on January 19, 1807 in Westmoreland, West Virginia. Lee is the most famous Southern general, and for good reason. He combined clever battlefield strategy with inspiring leadership, and with that he masterminded many of the best Confederate victories. Lee was the commander-in-chief of Virginia's forces, and when the war broke out, he made it his first task to concentrate troops, armaments, and equipment at major points where the invasion may occur. After winning the first Battle of Bull Run, Lee was one of the first people to realize that the war that had just started would be a long, all-out war. As military advisor to the Confederate president, he was able to introduce a coherent strategy into the Confederates' defenses. He was very successful keeping the North out until the spring of 1864. His most striking victory came at the Second Battle of Bull Run. To bring the fighting out of Virginia, he crossed over into Maryland, where he hoped to get the support of Southern sympathizers. When he arrived there, he didn't meet as many people as he thought, and his forces were almost wiped out at Antietam. He was able to bring the rest of his army across the Potomac and regroup. After that, he resumed a series of victories at Fredericksburg. He crossed the Potomac again, but his invasion was ended at Gettysburg, where without Stonewall Jackson, three of his top generals failed him. After sustaining several losses, with his army dwindling in size and the morale of his troops low, he surrendered at the Appomattox Courthouse on April 9, 1865. Some fun facts about Robert E. Lee are his dad, Harry Lee, was a Revolutionary War hero and one of George Washington's best friends. His mother, Anne Hill, came from a rich and privileged background. His parents raised him to believe in duty and honor. After the war, the South embraced him as its greatest symbol of nobility and defeat. His famous last words were, "Strike the tent." That's all for Robert E. Lee. The next Southern general we're covering is Thomas Jonathan Jackson, aka Stonewall Jackson. Thomas Jackson was born on January 21, 1824. His father, a successful young attorney, died when he was 3 years old, and 4 years later his mom died. Thomas and his siblings grew up poor. After an argument with his surrogate parents, he left them and walked 20 miles to live with his uncle, Cummins Jackson. With the help of his uncle's political connections, Thomas enrolled at West Point at age 18. He graduated in 1846 and remained in the military until 1852, when he left the Army to teach artillery tactics and natural philosophy as a professor at the Virginia Military Institute. When the Civil War began, he was commissioned as a colonel of Virginia's forces. In the first Battle of Bull Run, he earned his nickname Stonewall. In 1861, he was promoted to Major General. In 1862, he joined up with Lee's forces at the 7 Days Battle. When maneuvering away from enemy troops, he ran into his own front line, where his own troops accidentally fired on him and killed him. The soldier that shot him is still unknown to this day. Some fun facts about Stonewall Jackson are, his last words were, "Let us cross over the river and rest under the shade of the trees." His horse was stuffed after he died, and he enjoyed sucking on lemons and sleeping under wet sheets. That's all for Stonewall Jackson. The last Southern general we'll be covering is James Longstreet. James Longstreet was born on January 8, 1821, in the Edgefield district of South Carolina. He graduated from West Point in 1842, and he resigned from the Army when South Carolina left the Union. James Longstreet was a brigadier general for the Confederate Army during the American Civil War. He commanded the 1st Corps of the Army of Northern Virginia. Longstreet was promoted to lieutenant general in 1862. He participated in battles Robert E. Lee, second in command, and he fought in most of the major battles of the Civil War. He is credited for the defeat at Gettysburg because of his slowness in ordering Pickett's charge. Some other people credit Lee with the defeat because of his inability to cope with unwilling officers. In the Wilderness Campaign, Longstreet was severely wounded, but he did resume his position in the Army. James Longstreet was with Lee when he surrendered at the Appomattox Courthouse. James Longstreet became unpopular in the South after the war, partly due to his admiration of President Grant and because he joined the Republican Party. He served as the U.S. Minister to Turkey and as Commissioner of Pacific Railways. Some fun facts about James Longstreet are, he had many nicknames, including Warhorse, Old Pete, and the Dutchman. He was a famous poker player in the Army, and 3 of his children died in 1 week from the same illness. Also, he is credited with inventing trench warfare. That's all for James Longstreet and Southern Civil War generals. Next, Kate Bailey will be teaching you about Chickamauga and William Tecumseh Sherman.
The Battle of Chickamauga was fought in Cartoozy County and Walker County from September 18th to September 20th in 1863. There were an estimated of 34,624 total casualties. The two armies involved in this battle were the Army of Cumberland and the Army of Tennessee. The Union was aiming to force Confederates out of Chattanooga. Both armies were actually heading for Chattanooga when they met at Chickamauga. The Confederates continued to try to break the Union line, and once they did, they took advantage and drove the Union back. Rebels continuously launched attacks, but the Union held until after dark. Finally, the commander led the Union from the field, leaving it to the Confederate for a Confederate victory. William Tecumseh Sherman was born at Lancaster, Ohio on February 8, 1820. He was adopted after his father's death into the family of Thomas Ewing in 1829. He had a long military career. He was stationed at various southern stations, served in California during the Mexican War, added aid to many generals, but soon resigned and engaged unsuccessfully in banking and law at Lucas Turner and Company. Then was a superintendent of a military college at Alexandria, Louisiana. He was soon reappointed in the army as a colonel and wounded in the battle at Shiloh. He became general March 1869. He retired from active service February 1884 and died in New York City on February 14, 1891. Next, Joey will be teaching you about the Battle of Shiloh and Ulysses S. Grant.
Ulysses Simpson Grant was the 18th President of the United States. He was a Republican. He was born on April 27, 1822, in Point Pleasant, Ohio. He died on July 23, 1885, in Mount McGregor, New York. His father was Jesse Root Grant, and his mother was Hannah Simpson Grant. On August 22, 1848, he married Julia Boggs Dent. They had 4 kids: Frederick Dent Grant, Ulysses Simpson Grant, Ellen Renshall Grant, and Jesse Root Grant. He was a Methodist. He graduated from the U.S. Military Academy in West Point, New York. When the Civil War started, experienced officers like Grant needed more supplies. The governor of Illinois assigned Grant to make a disciplined fighting squad out of a rebellious Illinois volunteer regiment. He soon earned the respect of the volunteers. The Army noted his efforts and promoted him to brigadier general. Grant led his troops to win battles in the Western Theater. He captured Fort Henry and Fort Donelson, forced the surrender of Vicksburg, Mississippi, and defeated a larger Southern force at Chattanooga. He helped end the Civil War when he led his Union troops to trap the main Confederate army west of Richmond, Virginia, and forced its surrender on April 1865. At that point, General Grant was the most revered man in the Union. Lincoln's assassination was followed by the ineffective leadership of President Andrew Johnson. Johnson urged a moderate approach to Reconstruction that would not punish the South or protect the rights of newly freed African Americans. Republicans wanted to protect the rights of African Americans. In the election of 1868, Republicans backed Grant. He won. Here are some fun facts about Ulysses S. Grant. His great-grandfather was killed in the French and Indian War. Another fun fact is that the famous singer Judy Garland is said to be his first cousin. Shiloh